In the annals of American true crime, few tragedies have left a darker psychological footprint than the brutal massacre in Moscow, Idaho. The senseless killings of college students Kaylee Goncalves, Ethan Chapin, Madison Mogen, and Zana Colonel shattered a community and launched a relentless, nationwide manhunt. That manhunt culminated in the arrest of Bryan Kohberger, a criminology Ph.D. student who ultimately stood in open court, admitted his guilt, and accepted a sentence of life in prison without the absolute possibility of parole. There was no highly publicized trial. The gavel fell, and the legal system considered the book officially closed. But in high-profile criminal cases, the closure of a courtroom rarely silences the noise of public speculation. A new, highly controversial book titled Broken Plea, authored by Christopher Whitcomb, is attempting to systematically dismantle the narrative of the lone assassin. The book presents a provocative thesis. What if Bryan Kohberger's guilty plea negligently whitewashed a massive travesty of justice? By claiming to have accessed unreleased FBI transcripts, private jailhouse letters, and insider legal strategies, Whitcomb attempts to argue that the forensic foundation of the state's case was fatally flawed, going so far as to suggest that Kohberger may have had a phantom accomplice. To understand the architecture of this new defense theory, one must look at the single most damning piece of physical evidence left at the King Road crime scene, the Ka-Bar knife sheath. The DNA recovered from the snap of that leather sheath was the microscopic anchor that tied Bryan Kohberger directly to the massacre. Through advanced genetic genealogy, investigators traced a microscopic sample of skin cells back to Kohberger's family tree, eventually securing his arrest in Pennsylvania. However, Whitcomb argues that if the case had gone to trial, Kohberger's defense attorney, Ann Taylor, could have potentially had this entire piece of evidence thrown out due to catastrophic chain of custody errors. According to Whitcomb's investigation, the knife sheath was placed into an evidence bag, sealed, and sent to the state crime lab. He alleges that the initial lab refused to process it because the proper chain of custody documentation was missing. Whitcomb further claims that when the documentation later appeared, it looked highly suspicious, allegedly featuring multiple investigators' names, all written in the exact same handwriting, using the exact same black felt-tip pen. In a death penalty trial, the chain of custody is not a mere bureaucratic technicality, it is the absolute legal foundation of provenance. If a judge ruled that the DNA evidence was legally compromised and threw out the knife sheath, Whitcomb argues the prosecution's case would have instantly collapsed. Without the DNA, the state would be forced to rely entirely on circumstantial evidence, grainy surveillance footage of a white Hyundai Elantra, and digital cell phone pings locating Kohberger in the general vicinity of the house. Yet, this explosive legal theory is fiercely contested by the very authorities who processed the scene. Moscow Police Chief Anthony Dollinger vehemently refuted Whitcomb's claims regarding handwritten logs. Dollinger explicitly clarified that the local department has not utilized handwritten evidence logs for at least a decade. Instead, the Moscow Police Department relies on a strict, modernized system of electronic barcodes and green stickers to track evidence, a system that functioned perfectly in this specific case. Dollinger noted that the true legal test of evidence integrity is the physical condition of the packaging, ensuring there are no unauthorized cuts, scrapes, or tears on the seal. In the eyes of the police chief, the chain of custody was pristine, and the forensic facts definitively prove that one solitary individual committed the murders. Criminologist and seasoned defense attorney Dr. Casey Jordan also views the book's DNA arguments as a standard, albeit desperate, legal tactic. Dr. Jordan notes that the DNA sample recovered from the sheath was exceptionally small, reportedly consisting of fewer than 10 skin cells. While a defense expert might argue this falls below a standard testing threshold, Dr. Jordan calls this argument ultra-nitpicky. In the reality of a courtroom, jurors rarely care about the microscopic complexities of cellular degradation. If a forensic expert testifies that the defendant's DNA was physically present at the scene of a quadruple homicide, the jury generally considers the matter closed. Furthermore, Dr. Jordan dismisses the notion that stripping away the DNA would leave the prosecution with nothing. While defense attorneys love to attack cellular evidence, digital forensics can be equally devastating. The most incriminating piece of circumstantial evidence was not that Kohberger's phone pinged near the house, but rather the highly suspicious pattern of its usage. During the exact time frame of the brutal murders, Kohberger's cell phone was completely turned off, going entirely dark. As Dr. Jordan bluntly points out, nobody in the modern era goes on a late-night drive and simply turns their phone off. To a jury, that digital blackout acts as a flashing neon sign of premeditated guilt. But if the defense truly had the ammunition to dismantle the state's case, why did Bryan Kohberger surrender? Why did he bypass a trial, look a judge in the eye, and plead guilty? Whitcomb claims to have obtained a recorded conversation with Kohberger's defense attorney, Ann Taylor, discussing the plea. According to Whitcomb, Taylor stated that the decision to plead guilty was entirely Kohberger's own choice, and, shockingly, that she had no idea why he did it, nor did she ever explicitly ask him if he committed the crimes. To the general public, a defense attorney not asking their client for the truth seems absurd, but in the ruthless arena of criminal defense, it is a strict operational standard. Dr. Jordan references the classic primal fear rule. A defense attorney never asks the ultimate question. Knowing the absolute, factual truth of a client's guilt actively paralyzes a lawyer. It legally prevents them from utilizing certain defense strategies and limits their ability to aggressively attack the state's evidence. Ann Taylor's job was not to act as Kohberger's confessor. Her job was to analyze the evidence, explain the dire legal consequences, and allow him to make a choice. And the reality of those legal consequences was terrifying. The trial would have taken place in Idaho, a state that fiercely enforces the death penalty and notably does not allow for an insanity defense. Facing an Idaho jury with DNA evidence, digital blackouts, and the sheer savagery of the crime scene, a guilty verdict was almost a statistical certainty. By orchestrating the plea deal, Ann Taylor essentially saved her client's life. He admitted guilt, and in exchange, he avoided the execution chamber. Yet, the book attempts to sow one final seed of doubt. The theory of an accomplice. Could a single man have entered that house and executed 4 people in a matter of minutes without help? Both law enforcement and behavioral profilers roundly dismiss this theory as pure fiction. Criminal accomplices require a foundation of trust, communication, and mutual association. Bryan Kohberger was a profound, clinical loner. Investigators who mapped his entire digital life found that he virtually possessed no friends. His text message history was almost exclusively limited to conversations with his immediate family. In his academic and social life, peers actively avoided him, frequently documenting his creepy and obsessive behaviors. He simply did not possess the social infrastructure to recruit, trust, or manage an accomplice. Furthermore, in the criminal justice system, accomplices are liabilities. If another person had been involved, Kohberger would have undoubtedly leveraged their name to secure a better plea deal for himself. The isolation of Bryan Kohberger is further illuminated by never-before-seen documents highlighted in the book. Following his arrest, the FBI conducted an extensive interview with his mother, Marianne Kohberger. The transcripts reveal a heartbreaking cognitive dissonance. Marianne described her son as her angel, a quiet homebody who enjoyed running and loved the family dog. She swore upon her own life that her son was incapable of such violence, firmly believing the arrest was a massive federal mistake. But the man writing letters from inside his jail cell did not sound like an innocent victim of circumstance. Kohberger's correspondence to his family reveals a mind steeped in chilling arrogance and bizarre grandiosity. In an April 2023 letter to his sister, he wrote cryptically, "In the abstract sense and via intuitive capacities, the august effect can be analogized to the gravitation of heart's promise unto the green pastures ahead." In another letter to his family, he spoke of triumphantly ascending to new peaks and apprehending the beautiful pattern form of the labyrinthine path taken. These are not the words of a terrified, innocent college student. They are the ramblings of a man who believes he exists on a higher intellectual plane. This deep-seated arrogance perfectly aligns with the behavioral profile generated by criminal psychologists. Why did Bryan Kohberger commit these murders? Dr. Jordan suggests the public does not need to look for a complex conspiracy. They only need to look at the psychology of a hedonistic lust killer. Profilers believe the crime was entirely fantasy-based and highly sexual in nature, specifically targeting one or two of the female victims. Kohberger fits the behavioral archetype of an incel, an involuntarily celibate male harboring deep resentment towards society. Having struggled with severe social awkwardness, a history of heroin addiction, and extreme weight fluctuations, he was a man isolated from healthy, age-appropriate relationships. The brutal act of stabbing, known in psychiatric terms as piquerism, often serves as a substitute for sexual release in severely disturbed individuals. The murders were not a hit, and they were not a robbery. They were the violent culmination of a dark, escalating obsession. Books like Broken Plea will inevitably emerge in the aftermath of any high-profile tragedy, attempting to sell the illusion of doubt by magnifying microscopic forensic technicalities. They will question the chain of custody, scrutinize cell phone towers, and invent invisible accomplices. But the undeniable reality of the Idaho murders does not reside in hypothetical defense strategies. The reality resides in a courtroom, where a solitary man stood before a judge and admitted that he was the monster in the dark. Bryan Kohberger acted alone. He was driven by his own dark fantasies, and he will spend the rest of his life in a concrete cell, entirely isolated from the world he so violently disrupted.